Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of Binghamton City Council Work Session for Monday, November 14, 2022. Please stand for the pledge. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Clerk, we do a roll call for us, please?
Yes. Councilman Scaringi. Present. Councilwoman Restanetti.
Present.
Councilwoman Riley.
Present.
Councilwoman Friedman.
Present.
Councilman Burns.
Present.
Councilman Scanlon. Present. And President Strong.
Present.
That's all 7 here.
Okay, thank you for that. We will get right into it. It looks like we have our audited financial statements all bound up nice for us here, and we have Mr. Evans from the Bonadeo Group. So, welcome. Okay, thank you. We just need to know if we can keep Mr. Shager on for another year. Okay, I'm partially kidding, but that's. Thank you. Yeah, just when it goes green, you should be able to. Yeah, he's got to get relatively close to us so we can hear him.
All right. Okay, I am Greg Evans from the Bonadeo Group. I am the audit partner on your audit engagement. Here to present the results of the 2021 audit. Obviously, we're here in November of 2022. The timing is not ideal. We'd like to get this done a little bit sooner. Basically what happens and has been happening the last couple of years is we have to wait for the joint sewer treatment plan financial statements to be issued because that gets accounted for in a lot of the numbers we have in front of us today. So that's why that pushes us back into November or, the presentation in November, the issuance was in September. So I'll take you through a quick presentation of those audit results. We'll skip right over to page 2 of the presentation I handed out. We were engaged to do an audit of your financial statements. We were also engaged to do 2 different single audits, one of your federal funds and one of your New York State Department of Transportation funds. Over on page 3, the results of those audits. The financial statements, I always point out the numbers are yours. It's my job to give an opinion on those financial statements. The opinion is an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion, the highest level of assurance I can give you on those financial statements, exactly what you're looking for. As part of those financial statements, we do them in accordance with government auditing standards, which means we look at your internal controls over financial reporting. Happy to report no findings this year. Always a good place to be. As part of that, I always point out the fact that if there was adjusting journal entries proposed by me, you would have a finding known as a material weakness, meaning we could not give you that clean opinion. Happy to report no adjusting journal entries this year, so we're in good shape there. On to page 4, what is our opinion on those single audits? It's an unmodified opinion, meaning we looked at your compliance over federal regulations and we had no issues with the way you spent those federal dollars. Also an unmodified opinion relative to the New York State Department of Transportation funding. As part of your audit, we looked at the major program that we tested this year. The federal program was the ARPA funds, the state and local fiscal recovery funds. In 2021, you spent about $2.8 million. Again, no issues there relative to compliance or also internal controls over compliance. And then on page 5, I just pulled together a few of what I thought were the financial statement highlights on the fund financial statements. I always point out that you have 2 different financial statements in there. You have government-wide financial statements, which are all the assets and liabilities of the city pulled together. Generally not as useful for your purposes. Over on the fund financial side, the Gen Fund is sort of your main operating fund. For the year, we had a decrease in that fund balance of $4.2 million. You had budgeted to, in your original budget, use about $2.3 million. So a significant swing there, mostly due to additional transfers to your capital projects fund that you approved after year end. I always point out that unassigned fund balance is basically your savings account. No restrictions attached to that. We always look at that in terms of your annual expenditures, down to about 9% of your annual expenditures. Prior year, you were at about 20%. So you did use up some of that fund balance, as I just pointed out. And obviously that was for cap projects. I will point out that your unspent ARPA funds are located in your balance sheet under unearned revenue, and that was about $20 million. Until those dollars are actually expended, they will be hung up as a liability. Sales tax recorded exceeded your budget by about $2.3 million or 18%. We saw that across the state. Just about everybody ended up with more sales tax than expected. In terms of expenditures, you spent in the Gen Fund about $3.5 million less than you originally had budgeted for, with employee benefit expenditures coming in about $1.8 million under budget. Again, this is something that we've seen across the state, employee benefits just generally coming in lower. We would expect at some point in time that people are, coming out of the pandemic, again, being able to get some of those services that they hadn't received. And again, we would think that those costs would go up. So I wouldn't anticipate that positive variances, going forward. Okay, in terms of the cap projects fund, you do have still some projects going on, and you have $9.7 million in restricted cash still sitting there for that, and a bond anticipation note payable of about $38 million. As that's converted to long-term financing, that capital projects fund deficit will go away, and that will be converted to revenue. I always point that out because it looks a little bit odd to see that negative fund balance there for cap projects. So that's the very quick presentation. Obviously, the audit went well. Chuck and his staff were very helpful in getting us through it. No major issues, no findings. And again, the single audit went as planned with no findings there either. Be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Evans on the audit?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Councilman Burns.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, sure.
You're saying here that the fund balance as of today is 5,300,000? Is that?
Yeah, the unassigned fund balance, and that, again, that's as of 12/31/2021, right?
Right. And does that include, because it says the decrease in the fund balance of 4 million and was expected to use 2.3 million. Are we going to use, where do we use that? Is that 2.3 million that we're going to use? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, so Chuck just pointed out that total fund balance is let's grab that. Yeah, so
That's what I thought. Yeah.
total fund balance was just under 16 million. So I always look at the unassigned one, which is no strings attached. You haven't, assigned is usually for next year's budget, whether that's encumbrances or appropriated for next year's budget. And restricted is your reserve. So when I say that 5.4 million, that's the total, no strings attached. Fund
So
balance.
as far as savings go, so
Yeah.
if it has strings attached, then it's not really being saved. It's really just being kept there until it's spent on the money that it's already promised to.
Right, exactly.
And what about this, expected to use 2.3 million? in
So
fund-
that was the amount you had appropriated from the prior year to basically, the goal obviously every year is to balance revenues and expenditures, and you usually try to use a little bit of fund balance. If you have significant fund balance like you did to balance that.
Mhm.
So it's essentially kind of comes in as a revenue. So you actually used a little bit more than you had anticipated for the
I
year.
see. And that's not going to decrease from the fund balance that we have now.
No.
Okay.
No, that was I always like to point out what you thought you were gonna do and what you actually did for the year.
Thank you.
Sure.
Councilman Scringy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks so much for being with us today and for all the work that you guys put into this. I wanted to take a quick note. So there's both an individual and I guess somewhat of a more collective question around the state with respect to you and your firm's experience of auditing other municipal governments. So you talked about the liability factor of the unused ARPA funds. Right. Which makes sense just from an accounting perspective because they have not been allocated for anything yet. That being said, my first question is, given that the unallocated portion is being viewed as a liability, how are you controlling for the fact that it's on the liability side, but it's technically not a hit on the city? If that makes sense?
Yeah, I think so. So, basically you have the cash, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, which is sort of unusual for most of the federal grants that we receive. They're
Yeah.
usually on the reimbursement basis, meaning you spend the money, you get it.
And you get it back at some
Right.
point
So-
post.
So this money was actually fronted to you
Yeah.
for the purposes of ARPA, which
Right.
as we know have changed over time. So that's why it's a liability. So you have it sitting there in cash and then you have to do something with it.
Right.
So that's where the obligation comes from.
Got it. Okay. But that's not being held negatively against us in
No.
the assessment. It's just that it hasn't been allocated yet.
Right. Right.
Okay.
When you think
Yeah.
about it on the balance sheet, it's sort of a wash. You have the
Right.
cash, you got the liability,
Because of the double entry. Yeah, I know.
Exactly.
And I appreciate that. I wanted to get that from you because, just generally speaking, I think someone would hear, oh, millions of dollars and it's a liability. And I just want to get it out on the record that it's not a liability in the sense of like a traditional liability, largely because of what you said, because the money has been fronted to us, then it's just on hand, has to be spent within a certain amount of time and it has to be allocated.
right.
Got it.
Exactly.
The second question, which I guess is the more broad one, I was wondering if you could in any way, shape or form, in a broad sense, speak to the experiences that you've had with, and your firm, auditing other municipalities around New York State, given last year. And I don't know if you can speak to where we stack up within the mix of ARPA funds and the use, because I think a lot of people, understandably so, because it's not out there, I don't think a lot of people actually realize the amount of ARPA funds that for legal categorical reasons are being used for operational aspects of municipal governments. And I was just wondering if you could speak to the commonality of that, how often you're seeing that, and maybe if you can, where Binghamton kind of stacks up respectively. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and again, this is opinion only at this point. I would say Binghamton has done a good job of finding projects. You know, as opposed to operational type, you know, fill the budget type gaps. Which of course becomes dangerous because once that money's gone, if you have a program, a salary or whatever, you got to find ways to fund that. So I do think that Binghamton has done a good job finding those projects. And quite honestly, you know, we've seen across the state a lot of people still holding on to, you know, significant dollars and not really doing a ton of planning for various reasons. But I mean, the reality is we are getting towards the end of, you know, when you have to have it done. So you have to have your funds obligated by the end of 2024. You have to have your projects finished by the end of 2026. So, you know, I always point that out. I mean, there are municipalities that, you know, certainly haven't done much, and I'm sort of prodding them to, all right, let's make some plans here, so that you're not in a situation where, you know, and hopefully nobody ends up in this situation where they, you know, looking at repaying those funds.
Very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Anything else from Mr. Evans on the audit? We just got these. Would you be available email, or we funnel some things to check if anything comes up? I'd like to go through more. Obviously, that's pretty, I'm used to looking at financial statements, but it's a pretty large with the single audits included and stuff like that. If we had any kind of follow-ups or any clarifications.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd
Okay.
certainly be available. And you're right, the government financial statements are
Right.
monsters for sure.
Right. And some of the notes and some of the you know, the after litigation stuff, I want to kind of just look through them. I don't know if I'll have anything, but definitely be, you know, I don't want to spend, you know, tons of time right now with everything going on. But does anybody else have anything right now for Mr. Evans? Councilwoman Riley, go ahead.
Thank you again. Thank you, Council President, not again, but thank you. Hello, how are you? Thank you for being here. Just before you leave, I know in the letter to the City Council, again, because we just received this, it does speak to the summary of unadjusted differences that summarize uncorrected misstatements in the financial statements.
Right.
And you've outlined them, but then what has happened since?
So basically what those are, we point out adjustments that were what we consider to be passed on, meaning that they weren't material to the financial statements. And one of those that you see there, the larger one, was something that we passed on last year. So the effect of it is this year, that goes away. And the reason we passed on it was for, you know, two reasons. One, it wasn't material, and two, it was a timing issue that, you know, with immaterial entries, we sort of let them just flush out over the 2-year period. So that's what you see there. The other one was clearly, I think it was 24,000, clearly not material. So it certainly, at some point in time during the audit, it does take effort to run those through those financial statements. So that's why, you know, and you know, obviously not the goal to pass on those things, but at some point in time, we just have to say, okay, that one doesn't matter, and sort of move on so we can get the audit done. But we are required to report that to you. So that's what those are.
Thank you for that. Now, is there typically a dollar amount that you consider immaterial?
Yeah, and I don't have that off the top of my head, but we do it on basically by each fund. So we have a different dollar amount for the general fund, the capital projects fund, and then we have an additional amount for the government-wide fund, which would certainly be higher because, again, that's all of your assets and liabilities together. So that's sort of a moving target.
Absolutely. So somewhat of a percentage of the total line or fund.
Right.
So thank you. Thank you for that clarification. That concludes my question.
Thank you. Anything else from Mr. Evans? Okay, thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Okay, Chief Sikorsky. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. All right, tell us about RL 22-259A and 269.
Right, I have it on all in one here. Well, the first one is we had a car totaled. One of our investigators was sitting at a red light. And somebody came up, plowed in the back of them. So we settled, the Corp Council settled with the insurance company for $13,953. Chuck says we have to put that going into the insurance recovery fund, then move it back out in the vehicle fund in order to for the dollars to replace that vehicle. The rest of it is the move 57,000 out of the in-house training line and to move 18,000 out of travel and training line and move it into an equipment line for various pieces of equipment we'd like to purchase.
Councilwoman Riley, go ahead.
Thank you, President Strawn. Hello again, Chief Sikorsky.
Hi.
What is the total number of vehicles we are trying to purchase?
Well, this isn't even enough to make up for one.
Oh, okay.
So we're putting it there. We're gonna have to add money to it. It's an unmarked car. It wasn't patrol cars. Unmarked cars are quite a bit less expensive than marked vehicles. This was an unmarked vehicle. We just buy, go to bid or on the, usually the lowest price we can get. So that would go towards purchasing one vehicle.
Okay, and what is the estimate for the one vehicle?
They usually run around 21 to 23, 24,000.
Okay, so just for clarification, because we're decreasing in-house training by 57 and then adding 13,000. So we are exceeding almost 70,000.
It's apples and oranges.
Okay,
The 14,000 about is going into a line just for police vehicles
okay,
by itself. The rest of the money that we're moving is going into an equipment line, not for vehicles, for other various equipment.
thank you for clarifying that for me.
Councilmember Friedman, go ahead.
Thank you, President Strong. Hi again, Chief Sikorsky. How are you?
I'm good.
So to follow up on Councilwoman Riley's question, the other equipment is unrelated to the car that was damaged. It's
Yes.
not like equipment
Yes,
that was
we
in the
just
car.
put this on this one RL. They're not related to each other at all.
Okay, so this is kind of like a consolidation of two separate budget transfers that are together in one RL. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, Chuck did this for me, just to be honest.
Okay.
Chuck did it.
All right, thank you.
Anything else for Councilman Scringy? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Chief, for coming down. Were there any officers that were involved in the accident? Are they okay?
They're fine, thanks. It was it totaled the car, but
Yeah.
he had sore neck for a few days, but he's fine.
He's okay. All right.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Chief. I
Yep, he's
appreciate it.
fine.
Anything else for Chief Sikorsky on 22-259A and 22-269? Okay, thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Wait, hold on.
Oh, have a good-
What? Didn't you do?
It's all on the same one on mine. You might have got them separately when they did the legislation, but what else do you have?
That's Chief Gardner.
Oh, that was the first, that's the same thing. That's the 14,000.
It's 259A and 269. So the 269 should be to what? 259? 259B? Right.
I just have one.
So what is the number for the second one? So we can make sure. 269. There's two RLs, so that, yeah, there's two RLs. We knew that, but the numbers are correct. They probably split it after they had some of the other ones down to the.
Okay. Okay, so then
You have a question? Go ahead.
yes, that, and thank you, President Strawn. I'm sorry, I did not hear the discussion of 269. So 259A is about the police vehicle and 269 is about police vehicle accessories. So these are police vehicle accessories for the car that was totaled. These are also separate.
Yeah, I don't know. Now, wait a minute. Oh, there is a second one that I didn't have. But this is the one. I did, I just got the one. So I know what it is now. The 60,000.
Yeah.
Okay, I stand corrected. I didn't get the second one. The second one is, well, we had to move money, the council did. We had 8 vehicles ordered, if you guys recall, and they upped the price on us, $8,500 a car if we wanted to keep the order in. So we took money out of this line that we had to pay that 64 or 68,000, and now we're putting it back.
Okay, Councilmember Freeman, go ahead.
Thank you, President Strawn. Okay, so just to clarify, these are 8 vehicles that you had intended to purchase and
They've been ordered for almost a year. So all of a sudden, we
Okay.
got an email saying there's a price increase, and I think it's criminal. 8,500 a car, just about. If you want to keep this order, this is from Ford. Each car went up $8,500, and I came to council. We moved $68,000 to make up the difference.
Right.
Or they said your order's canceled. We need police vehicles, and so we took the money out of some money that we had, the 68,000 out of that line, and we put it back where we took the money out of.
so the price at which you had ordered was not locked in, even though this was a
Well,
year
I thought it
ago.
was, but it is
Right.
what it is. They said either pay the money or your order's canceled.
Okay, wow, that's outrageous,
Yeah,
in
well,
my opinion.
I agree with you.
Okay, and so then the police vehicle, so, okay, if we could flip back to the first RL with the unmarked car that needs to be replaced, that
Has
will
nothing to
have,
do with it.
that has nothing to do with it, so that the police vehicle accessories will need to be ordered separately for,
Yes,
this
we
other-
took the money out of there,
okay,
and we all those cars are ordered. We have to put all these stuffs in them, lights, siren, computers. That runs 12 to 14,000. So it's got to be put back to buy that stuff when those new cars come in.
I see, and that's gonna be separate from this now new cost that's $8,500 increase per
Yes,
car.
we've already. That's where that 68,000 went.
Right.
So
right,
that
right.
68,000 is coming back to buy that stuff. We're just
Gotcha.
moving
Okay,
from one
so
line
this
to-
price is going to include the the car and the accessories.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else on these 2 RLs for Chief Sikorsky? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. What's that? Who is anybody, you gonna do for Chief Gardner?
Okay. I'm not sure where the chief
RL
is.
22-260, amend the fire budget for accept the New York State Healthcare Workers Bonus.
This is an RL that Chief Gardner has asked to be expedited. This is a New York State healthcare worker bonus that New York State is giving out to multiple, not only fire departments, but people that I'm going to say work through the pandemic and COVID type situations, whether it's nurses and things of that nature throughout New York State. And each firefighter that's eligible can get $1,500. I believe it's twice over a 6-month period, 2 6 months periods that they have to certify they work during that time period. That's what this RL is for the first one. Don't know what the exact number is. I know we're getting ready. It's 167,934. 156,000 is going to the firefighters themselves. 11,934 is to pay for the city's FICA portion tax. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, there's different quarters. We had to do that for at Children's Home.
Yeah.
They qualify for 2 quarters based on, yep. And it's funded through the state. Any questions or comments for,
Mr. President.
yeah, go ahead,
Mr. President.
Councilman
Chuck-
Scrivby.
Thank you, sir. Chuck, thank you. Is the reason why the chief is asking for that to be expedited? Is there some sort of
There's a time,
deadline?
yes, there's
Okay,
a time period. Yes.
thank you.
And
Thank you,
actually what
sir.
happened is we received the money
Yeah,
and we sat on it for about 25 days. We were trying to figure out what it was for. But
sure.
we didn't know.
Yeah.
It came into our normal federal grant money.
Yeah.
And it was like, what was that for?
Thank you, Chuck. Mr. President, I'd support expediting that. Thank you.
Yeah, there's certain deadlines that you have to pay it out. I mean, there is a quarter, you can push it into the future, but when you have the money, you might as well get it out to the people that have it coming. Councilmember Freeman, go ahead.
Thank you, President Strawn. So you said that New York State is giving this to not only firefighters, but other essential workers as
Yes.
well. Okay, and so are we also able, or are we seeing that with this money as well, or this is only for,
This is only for our firefighters.
okay, and that's, we received money from New York State only for our firefighters?
Yes.
Okay, so did we apply for this?
Yes.
Okay, and are there other essential workers that we,
Not that
Could
fit,
apply?
not for the city. The only ones that are eligible are people that are eligible to work on the ambulances. As
Right.
an example.
Nursing, ambulance, and for us, it was Office of Mental Health, but not OCFS. I'm not trying to get to whatever, but we tried to get it as far as we could, and then a lot of people didn't. So it creates a little bit of but there's nothing you can do about that. There's certain lists of people that qualify. And
okay,
yes, nursing, EMT, all that, all those.
It could have been done better, in my opinion. Okay.
Mhm.
I mean, it should, this is my opinion, people that work the ambulance should get it. People that aren't working the ambulance should not get it. If someone was out sick, they're getting it. Okay, they never worked it. Those are ways I think the state should have done this better, but we're following the guidelines that was outlined by the state.
I understand Chuck's concern about the program. The purpose of the program is to try to encourage the retention of people who provide these services. So whether they were actually working or available to work, they're still eligible because they want to encourage them to return and fill those roles. It is questionable. I definitely understand his questions about folks who didn't work the ambulance during those 2 periods, but because they could have worked and they can work in the future, they're eligible.
right. I think my concern, I guess, is more so, obviously people who are front facing, who have risky jobs, who work through COVID absolutely deserve hazard pay. But there are a lot of people who fit that description that are not accounted for in this specific RL, so I'm just wondering if how some people who,
Those-
I guess they wouldn't be city employees. So,
Those parameters were set by New York State.
right. So,
When you
the,
look
so
at
the,
the filter they gave us, these are the only people that qualify.
Yeah.
so the only city of Binghamton employees who would qualify for this particular hazard pay are just firefighters.
Firefighters.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, the way it's written is if you don't pay it out to the people that qualify, you can get fined. And if you pay it out wrong or too many people, you get fined. Like, it's a very tight, like, if you have to give it out to the people that qualify, you have no choice,
Right.
which is good. We want to help
That's
those
fine.
people.
Of course, yeah.
But for
of
the
course,
other
our
people,
firefighters-
for the other people, it creates, why don't I, why, it's, but it is what it is.
Right, I know, that's
It's
exactly
very
what I'm saying. There's
difficult.
a lot of people who were
Yes,
front facing risky jobs during COVID that are not getting this kind of bonus pay that I think that
Yes.
everyone ought to receive.
and they wonder why
Yeah.
they aren't getting it and blah, blah, blah.
Right, exactly. Okay, but that's good to know that the firefighters are the only city of Binghamton employees who qualify for this. That answers my questions. Thank you.
Anything else for Mr. Shager on RL 22-260? Okay, we will move on to RL 22-263 and 264, and Grace is down here to present those for us.
Okay, so these RLs, one is to enter into an agreement with Helmet for Hard Hats, which is a nonprofit that connects veterans with in-demand construction jobs. And the second one is to allocate money towards that.
Any questions or comments for Grace on RL 22-263, RL 22-264? Councilman Scringy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hey, Grace, good evening. Thank you for presenting these. The one in relation to helmet hats, do we have a general sense of, is there certain criteria that vets would need to meet the possibility of taking advantage of this program? Is there any like city residence requirement or anything like that? I didn't know if we had any info on that.
Believe it's a statewide program. I can get more information on that
I
for
appreciate it.
you in regards to what the qualifications are. So
Awesome.
I can get that to you this week.
Thank you very much. Did a great job. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Anything else for Grace on RL 22-263 and 264? Councilmember Friedman, go ahead.
Thank you, President Strong. Hi, Grace.
Hi.
How are you?
Good for you.
Good. So this sounds like a great program, and I like Councilman Scringy, I'm just wondering if there's any kind of maybe not a contract, but kind of like just numbers of how many, this $50,000, how many people can this help, or how long the program might go for?
Yeah, I can definitely get that information. for
Yeah,
you.
that would be great, because this sounds great. Thank you.
Perfect.
Anything else for Grace on these two RLs? Okay, thanks, Grace.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, we have Mr. Merkel for 1, 2, 3, 4 RLs on the DPW. Hi, Dan.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Okay, looks like you have 4 RL 22, 265, 66, 68, and 76.
22,265 RL is for the increased cost of fuel bags, production, tip and fee costs. Everything's gone up and we're trying to adjust it, and we want to transfer some funds to cover it.
Anything for Dan on RL 22, 265? Okay, go on to 266, Dan.
266 RL is for the transfer of funds to help cover the overtime costs for the maintenance of roads, the street department.
Questions or comments on RL 22, 266? Councilmember Friedman, go ahead.
Thank you, President Strong. Hi, Dan, how are you?
Good, how you doing?
Good. So if I'm remembering correctly, at our last meeting, we also were increasing The budget for overtime costs, is that
Yeah,
correct?
that was for signals and combined shop.
Okay, so this is different.
Yes. this is
Different overtime.
Maintenance of road, you know.
Okay, and do you predict that this $8,000 will get us through the end of the year?
I sure hope so.
Okay, thank you.
We got a storm coming.
Went from summer to winter right away,
Yeah.
right? Anything else on 22-266 for Mr. Merkel? Councilwoman Riley, go ahead.
Thank you, Council President. How are you, Dan?
Good. How are you?
And thank you for being so responsive to the Asbury Court residents. Did I hear we will be stopping road paving Friday?
Friday. Friday. the
All
plant's
road
closed.
paving
Yes.
from here on out till the next season.
Right.
So,
But we have the cold patch on order coming to help get us through the winter.
all right. Are there any major roads like the one we discussed that need to be completed before Friday in lieu of the cold patch operation with the standard operation instead of the? cold?
No.
Okay,
Once
that's
we
the
do
last-
Asbury Port, we'll be set.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Okay. RL 22-268.
Oh, this is transfer of funds to help cover the parts. We had a sweeper, unfortunately. Was with all the leaves on the ground, he was sweeping some of the streets we milled to pave. And the casting was pretty high and he did some damage to a sweeper. So this helped cover the costs so we can get that sweeper back on the road.
Any questions or comments on RL 22-268? Okay. RL 22-276.
Okay, this is transfer of funds. It's a personal services. I had a MEO open, not filled, so I'm using those funds to transfer to cover the cost of tires and again, vehicle parts and elevator service for the remainder of the year in City Hall. And again, this is a position that I've had empty since June.
Questions or comments on RL 22-276? You're in charge of the elevators, Dan?
Yeah.
Enough, that's it. Okay. Anything else on any of these RLs for Dan? Okay, thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You don't have to, you can pass them around. Okay, we have Mr. Sager, RL 22-261. What's that? Yeah, that's fine. Yep, absolutely. Okay, we're gonna shift. Chuck's gonna yield temporarily so we can get Billy in and out so she can go home. Thank you, Billy. So you have 3, 270, 271, and 272.
There's 4. There's another one.
Oh,
on the
4
next
is it?
page.
Sorry, 273.
Um,
Yep, so she got 4.
The first one is to request an increase of $2,500 for permits, fees, and fines to be taken from contingency for expenses in excess of budget appropriation.
Okay. Any questions or comments on RL 22-270? Page 30-ish. Okay. RL 22-271, Billy?
Okay, my next request is for an increase of $33,277.14 to be taken from the contingency line. This amount is to cover the remainder of the legal services fees for the Joe Bath project.
Questions or comments on RL 22-271? Councilmember Friedman, go ahead.
Thank you, President Sean. Hi, Billy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks. I'm sorry, if we could just flip back to 270. I was just wondering what the increase in fines and fees is due to? I'm sorry if you mentioned it and I missed it while I was flipping through my packet.
We had additional fines for the CN Bath event that came out of this line that were unexpected.
Okay, and is that, are we continuing to be fined or this was a one-off?
Not at this point. It's one-off at this point.
Okay, knock on wood.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so this should cover.
Yes.
everything.
it
Okay,
should.
great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else on 22-271? Legal services. Okay, RL 22-272.
All right, we received another check from FEMA and I am requesting this to be expedited so that I can give payments to the owners. We're gonna increase the emergency disaster assistance by 295,737.08 for state and 887,211.23 for federal emergency disaster assistance.
Any questions or comments on RL 22-272? Okay, RL 22-273.
Okay, I need to make some adjustments to the CN event budget accounts because we had unexpectedly large water bills that are going to be paid out of the equipment and capital outlay. So I'm requesting an additional $100,000 and it'll be moved over from the professional services, equipment lease and rental and the sludge and waste disposal line.
Any questions or comments on RL 22-273? Councilmember Friedman, go ahead.
Thank you, President Strong. So similar to my last question, well, this is a corrective expense, but this is, are we anticipating that the water bills will continue to be higher than normal? Or are they back to what they?
They'll go back to normal. We had to use the city water to run the plant because the normal process is to use effluent and we couldn't do that while the back was down.
Okay, so since the water bills are expected to go back to normal, this $100,000 again will cover all of the unexpectedly high bills.
Yes,
And then once they go back to normal, it'll be in our regular budget.
it'll go out of the regular budget line. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, anything else for Billy on this one or any of the four RLs before we? No. Okay,
All
thank
right,
you.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Okay, Chuck, we'll go back to RL 22-261.
261, I'm asking to increase the staff accountant position in my office from 59,000 to 60,000. Position's been empty since May. We're able to make an offer to someone at 60,000. And hopefully that person will start here by the end of the month to get ready for the year end, and the money's available in the vacant position. Money's available in the vacant position I've had since it's been during the year. I will have to come back in January and change this from 59 to 60 in next year's budget.
Okay, any questions or comments on RL 22-261? Okay, RL 22-267.
267 is a budget amendment based off of the settlement agreement we've had with the sewage treatment plant project. We will not be borrowing $549,000 as we get this settlement. I'm paying down the debt associated with it.
Any questions or comments for Chuck on RL 22-267? Okay, RL 22-277.
277 is to increase the worker comp fees by $7,700 and decrease employee benefits by $7,700. The state fees came in higher than I anticipated, that we have to pay like a state fee related to our worker comp insurance bill. I think I have like 20,000 in there and it's 27,000.
Excuse me. Okay. Any questions or comments on RL 22-277? Okay, on to guess some employees committee, RL 22-274.
274. This is a request to change our, oh no, this is the record of activities. This is for elected and appointed officials. Being a new administration, we need to have record of activities for people that are appointed like myself and send that up to the state. So that's what this is a request for. We'll have to pass legislation saying that you approve it, and we have to, I believe, put it out on the website for 30 days, as well as keep in Lee's office for 30 days. Then we can send it to the state. So hopefully we get it filmed by year end. We're very close. The final ROA that I'll get to you before you vote on it. Okay, I have some changes. I gave you one that I have so far, but I'm still working on getting data from people.
Councilwoman Residenti, go ahead.
Sophie, we're gonna do it all together. Okay, we have people from yourself and prior employee that we have to do. We'll do that separate, but it'll be part of this whole agreement. Okay,
And it's something we do every year.
it's what?
And it's something we do every year? Or is it?
No,
because of
you
the
have to do it
administration?
during the administration. So like the council individuals, you go from, I think, when we elected 2019 to 2023, you have to do it one 3-month period during that time period. In the new Cram administration, it goes from 22 to 25, I think, at the end of that year. Okay, so that's what this is for. But while we're doing it, we're gonna implement the other people that we need to. I will say this, if there's anyone else in council that hasn't,
Well, ours
done
was
this.
done like 2 years ago, right? When, yeah,
here's what,
ours was done like 2 years ago or a year and a half
yes,
ago.
but not everybody filled it out.
Right,
Okay,
right. Councilwoman Riley, go ahead.
Thank you again. So there is existing legislation that defines what we needed to submit back in 2020, correct?
yes, but you can give me a call tomorrow, Angela. I'm not positive that you and Aviva are on there. Okay, I don't think you filled out the forms.
Yes, I did,
Did you?
because you and
Okay.
I went back on email
Okay,
about
then,
the
okay,
state saying you didn't do something, remember?
okay.
Okay, so if there's something existing already, no.
You don't
This-
have to worry about it.
No. If we're gonna vote on legislation, it's not an individual topic. It's based upon what we're voting upon for the rest of the appointed and elected officials moving forward. So is there current legislation written in our documents that
Yes.
already exists? So we can just amend what we have in existence.
No, this is well, you can use it. Yes, you can amend that legislation. Correct. Yes.
Okay,
I gave them a copy of what the state wants. Okay, if you,
State may have imposed new and additional requirements in addition to what they went in 2020 in this year.
can we see the original legislation that has been voted on and approved as opposed to writing new legislation? Since something already exists that covers what we've submitted.
I have no doubt that what will happen is the legislation that you be adopted in 2020 will be amended or be used as the basis to adopt this. For
Can
the
we
new-
see, can we have a copy just so we can compare?
It should be in the legislative database.
right,
You have all that. But we can get it for you, pull it for you. Give it-
fine, I'll pull it up and send it out to everybody.
Yeah, that's fine.
That concludes my question.
RL 22-278.
22-278 is a resolution requesting a change to the retirement system that we currently offer our employees. This piece of legislation will mostly affect CSEA management tested employees and very few fire police employees. But they will be included in here. And what this is that this encourages people not to use their sick time. Okay, currently we pay out sick time, and I'll just not sure this is 100% positive, but I'll use a person may have 250 sick days when they retire. We pay them out 2/3 of 150 or 100 days. Okay, those additional days get wasted, and sometimes people will just take them off over the last couple of years of being knowing that they're going to retire. This will give them that extra 100 days added to their time of service, which will increase their retirement plan, the retirement dollars, and gives them an incentive not to do that. It only will apply to a person that retires from the city of Binghamton. Example being, if I was to leave the city of Binghamton this year or next year and not retire, I would not get any of that benefit, and all my sick days would go unspent back to the city. If someone only had 150 sick days and got paid out for 100, they would get no benefit for this. It doesn't help every single employee, but it does help encourage the people with a lot of sick days not to go out and take them over the last 3 years, which does happen. I'm going to tell you.
They just use them up over a couple of years before they announce they're even retiring at all.
They know they're going to retire and they start using up their sick days. And they get down to, they may have 250 and they get down to the 150. This gives that incentive not to do that. When people do that, you either pay overtime for these people, or you're paying them out cash instead of, in this way, we're paying it through the retirement system.
I mean, you're paying, sorry.
Go ahead, Councilman Burns.
Thank you, Mr. President. You mean you're paying overtime to the person that has to take their place?
Yes,
Right.
in some cases.
Any questions or comments on RL 22-278?
The cost of this is estimated to be $13,000 a year out of about a, say, $1.3 million.
You mean total of 13,000?
That's all included in the package. I gave you their estimates on this.
Okay, anything else for Chuck on these RLs? Are you going to do the one for Mr. Kruger?
It's actually should be me. It was
What?
filled out incorrectly by
RL
someone in my department.
22-275?
This is the last set of costs associated with the joint sewage treatment plant project running out of City Hall. We're moving $11,374 into the project analyst line and professional service line of 1,709. I'm decreasing the fund balance by 13,083 to do that. Half of this money will come back through the year-end process. So the city's true cost of this is about half that 13,000. I think we get reimbursed 51% from other municipalities for this.
Questions or comments for Chuck on RL 22-275?
On that same notion, every single project that's so all the costs associated with this project has been paid off except for one contract that we're still negotiating.
Okay, thanks, Chuck.
Is that it?
Thank you. Okay, I added an item here. I was on YouTube the other night. It actually is pretty easy to follow the meeting. It was hard to see the screen, but I didn't feel great the other night, but I was listening. So appreciate everybody that was here, and Chairman Scringy, I should say, for leading the initial discussion and having showing the mapping and everything else. So I wanted to add, I know it was mentioned to add, I wanted to add a brief discussion. I wanted let Councilman Scringy just lead that discussion. And to make sure if there's any questions of the process that we're going through, the timeframes and the next steps. Councilman Scringy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, thank you to all my colleagues for joining us. Just to kind of re-summarize here. So the redistricting process will be held in the Municipal and Public Affairs Committee, and we'll move through the process to expedite it to the full body. Corporation Council was kind enough to provide us a general guideline with some important things to remember as it relates to the home rule law in New York State legislation, as well as what the time delineations are that we have to deal with respect to ensuring that we get this done in a timely manner. So we spent the first meeting kind of going through the initial census data, difference from 2010 through now in 2020. Corp Council spoke for a little bit, and we set draft dates. The MPA committee motioned and unanimously voted to establish this timeline with respect to a final draft of legislation coming through, voting on it at the December 21st meeting. In addition, in consultation with the city clerk's office, as well as with the city IT department, if you go on cityofbinghamton.gov and you go to the city council webpage, immediately at the top is some important general census information that is available. We also have the Broome County GIS portal redistricting map tool that is available online and accessible for anyone to see and use, is available there as well. The motion that was put forward by MPA to the entire body was to maximize the amount of time for public input, and that can be submitted at redistricting@cityofbinghamton.gov. The public hearing will be held on December 7th. However, we will continually allow, as we should, to maximize it, public input all the way up until the Friday before the evening of December 21st. And all of that information is available, again, on the city website for anyone to be able to not just sift through, but use. It's also important to remember that the city clerk's office, both the City of Binghamton clerk and the City of Binghamton deputy clerk on a substantive level, will have nothing to do with any drafts, any proposed maps. All they will do is they will aggregate any public input that we receive and obviously provide it to the entire body. So that being said, that's where we're at. The MPA committee made a motion to move those things forward to the entire body, and that was accepted unanimously. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask and let me know. If not, that's all I have, Mr. President. Thank you.
Chairman Scringy, I was just going to ask, how do we, I don't want to say whittle down for lack of a better term, if we have different people that are doing, how do we, is that going to go through the committee are we going to narrow it down at some point to 1 or 2 or 3, or how do you see that part of it? Is the mayor's office going to present? I know you talked about the clerks not doing it. Is the mayor's office going to do one? Do you know, or have they even communicated that at all?
Yeah, so
just as part of the process.
No, procedurally, it's a very fair question. So for all intents and purposes, as it relates to any potential draft map, right, whatever that might look like, we could have one draft. Technically, we could have 7,000,003. Right? Anybody can submit, whether they're an elected official, whether they are a city resident, whether they live in the town of Green. It really doesn't matter. as a standing committee in the city charter, the purpose of any standing committee when they make a motion and pass something is that that motion, for all intents and purposes, is the proposal to the entire body. So the standing committee members are Councilwoman Rezinetti, Councilwoman Riley, and myself. It would seem to me that as the MPA committee whittles things down, which again, just objectively speaking, there's not a lot of time for this, but again, making sure that we're obviously taking into account anything that the public may offer, it would seem to me that the body would, the MPA committee rather, forgive me, could either A, they could vote on a singular draft and then say to the committee of the whole, the body, that this is the map that the MPA committee by majority or unanimously endorses, or the MPA committee could offer, say, 2 or 3 out of however many we receive, and then the broader body could look at that. I guess if you want to get technical, since standing committees make recommendations to the whole body, it would probably be more consistent for MPA to, at a bare minimum, in majority sense, endorse a singular draft, and then the body could vote that up or down. That would arguably be the most efficient way to do it. Again, because that's what a standing committee by definition does.
Right. But then effectively the committee would be deciding if there's only one choice.
No,
No.
because the body could vote it down.
Right.
So the body, say it again.
Either way, you need to have a plan enacted by the 21st. So
Correct.
putting 2 or 3 plans on the table may be the best and most efficient way to accomplish that.
Right. Yeah. And we have to remember, I'm assuming just with the 7 of us, there may be some drafts. I'm assuming members of the public may want to offer drafts. So obviously we want to treat all of those equally. Given the timeline, it probably is better that the MPA committee endorses 2 or 3 drafts. So that way the body can vote to endorse one or select one. Because obviously, technically speaking, just procedurally, that's what would have to happen in the end. Which I personally have no problem with if that is what the majority of the MPA committee would decide to want to do. I have no problem with that.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Anybody play with the maps? Dick around with it a little bit?
It's a really interesting tool.
Yeah.
All right. Having some fun with it?
The comment is, I understand that you're submissions from everybody. I get that, but they really can only make it to those final 2 or 3 if they meet the requirements of the law.
Right.
So if people who are submitting it need to understand that. They need to
Right.
be familiar with the municipal home rule law. And if they don't, the first one is that 2.5 deviation
Right.
from mean. That is the hardest one to meet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the committee, or people from the public or elected officials or
Yeah.
whoever can submit their plans for your consideration, but if there's not a documentation that it meets those requirements.
Is there something on the software that
That's gonna go
stamps
real
it that it
So, yeah,
does that?
so
So-
I'm going to put this out there now on the public record as it relates to this entire redistricting process. At the expense of being blunt, at its most simplest level, it's an issue of numbers, not ideology, not politics, not geographic boundaries, not census blocks, not election districts, not current council districts or whatever. So as I walked through in the first meeting where I illustrated to everyone how to save and export a map, I am making an executive decision that if the MPA committee receives a draft map that does not have the numerical boundary and book data that shows that all 7 proposed districts on the draft are not within the 5% deviation of the mean, the MPA committee will not accept it for review. I am making that executive, and there's nothing wrong with that because by
It's a moot
definition,
point.
we can't accept it anyway, so it doesn't matter.
No, we don't have time. to
I have
answer
a
that.
fear, that there may be some drafts that we receive
Right.
that data will not be in there.
Right.
Like if they only export it, say, as a PDF, which is the reason why I spent a lot of time doing that, because again, we've got to be within that 5% variance of the mean.
No, there's no sense of wasting time. on
Exactly.
everything. But is there a way that you can tell when they're exported that they have that would qualify? Or do you have to upload it back into the system and double check it?
Yes, so hypothetically, there are 2 things that they could do. They could either, number one, when they submit their proposal or their draft to redistricting at cityofbinghamton.gov, they can either A, place the .maps file in there, which then we can upload and review, or B, I guess technically what they could do is they could export the map as a PDF and export the book values as a PDF, but we're still going to need to get the .maps file anyway in there for final consideration.
Okay.
But again, if someone's having computer troubles, they could at least do the PDF option, so we could at least review it and be able to account for the fact that 5% variance is there. And I have no problem entertaining that. But again, we would need that in the end.
Mr. Chairman, also just for the members of the public who may be considering submitting it, I believe that your presentation about how you go about doing that has been loaded to YouTube. Is that correct? So it can be, people can go back and review it if they want to review the process because you walk them through that process.
That is correct. Yes, that's available online for public consumption.
Okay. Councilwoman Riley, go ahead.
Thank you again, Council President. So the MPA meeting was very lively, a lot of information shared. The question that has come since said meeting is that if a map is submitted and it meets all guidelines, will we, before we vote, or even if we decide that it's not one of the final maps moving forward from MPA, will these all be available in a public facing manner so that the public can see what was submitted?
Mr. President. Good. So just to make sure I understand the question correctly, is operating on the assumption that any proposal draft that's submitted meets all legal criteria. Will that draft be available for public consumption? Is that what you're asking, Councilwoman? So in principle, absolutely yes, because number one, by being emailed to a cityofbinghamton.gov email address, so that's number one. Number two, I have no problem as chair of the committee entertaining maybe say once all drafts are reviewed, taking the ones that do meet all of the criteria, maybe binding them into a singular PDF and just putting that out there. I don't have a problem with that. Sure.
That's a good idea. I'd like to see
city
some of
clerks
them.
because it's just going to end up being a FOIL request if anybody wants it anyway. So I don't have a problem with that. Sure.
Go ahead.
The concern then is we must have deadlines for the public so they know that if it's submitted before the 17th, for example,
right,
and it meets criteria, this will be then, you know what I mean? Or are we using our 28th for the public?
This is the fair question. This is the trade-off, right? So as we discussed during the MPA committee, our thought process, which I again stand by, I think it was the right way to go, was unanimous, was to maximize the time for public input. That being said, there's an opportunity cost with that. And the opportunity cost is the more time that is available for the receival of public input, the less time there is to aggregate all of that information. So that being said, again, in principle, and I'll put it on the record now, I have no problem supporting that. As it relates to that aggregate available list and the amount of time between the deadline for public consumption and December 21st, when we have to make a decision, that's literally going to be less than a week. So, in the grand scheme of things, prior to the final vote, there's not going to be a lot of time for it to be publicly available, but it still could be there afterward. But the problem is I'm not an attorney, and I cannot on a rolling basis say this map that we got on November 21st works and this one on November 22nd does not, because I'm not an attorney. I don't speak on the behalf of New York State redistricting law to do that. So we can do that, but again, out of fairness and equity for everyone in the public, we would have to do that at the end. I guess we could do it rolling, but then the question becomes who codifies prior to that deadline? Does it meet that criteria or not? And I am just going to put out here objectively, I do not believe this body is the body to do that. I don't know who that is, but I don't believe it's this body.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, but the other thing to keep in mind is that under the municipal home rule law, because it's a local law, the local law must be in its final format 7 days before it goes to public hearing, which means that the public's input has to be received before that public hearing,
Correct.
or at least before that deadline, because if you're going to vote on it, it has to be in its final format 7 days before.
Right.
So that puts us, I mean,
It
you can put it out to public facing after that timeline if it comes in,
Right.
but it really can't be voted on because
Yeah.
it's too late at that point.
Again, unfortunately, just objectively, the trade-off of maximizing time for public input. So just leaves less time on the other end.
That may influence your vote though on the three that are proposals or however many make the cut for the final legislation.
Essentially, the 7 days is a deadline.
It does become a deadline.
Correct.
So then if we have it and it's publicly available, we can then say it has not been reviewed by the committee, but this is what has been received.
Sure, we could do that. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I have no problem with that.
Okay, Councilmember Freeman, go ahead.
Thank you, President Strawn. So I realize that I have a procedural question now because we're presumably going to receive more maps than we will ultimately be voting on. So in my mind, there's two phases, right? There's the map receival phase, which is one form of public input where members of the public can submit maps, hopefully maps that will be acceptable because they abide by all of the laws. But then the second part is once we finalize X number of maps that have kind of made it to the second round, then there's another opportunity for public input where the public can give their opinions on the maps that we have instead of submitting new maps. But my procedural question then is, when we do ultimately vote on it, is it like we vote yay or nay on each map? Let's say there's 3 final maps or something, we vote yay or nay, or is it that we pick, like, we choose a map? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying. So hypothetically, if there's 11 different final drafts, right?
Mhm.
Do we vote yay or nay on all 11?
Right.
The answer to that question is technically no, but we theoretically could. Here's what I mean by that. At the end of the day, all this is an RL. So if there are hypothetically 7 final drafts, there would need motion and a second with a formalized through city clerk's office corresponding number for each of those. And they would also be on the non-preferred agenda or on the preferred agenda and yanked by our chamber rules to the non-preferred agenda. And then we would like you're hypothetically saying, give each one an up or down vote.
Right.
Technically, no, but yes, it's possible.
Okay, and I guess also if each map is its own RL, each map would also have to receive enough sponsorship from council members, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so it could be if we have a large number of maps, let's say 11 maps, for example, we can, there might be some maps that do not make it to the floor because they have not received enough sponsorship from.
That is
council members,
correct.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
And more likely, just logistically and procedurally, that whittling down process will occur.
Right.
To get to the floor, in order to be able to get a motion in a second, chamber rule pictures members of the body.
Right, okay. So that makes sense. But I think also just going back, this is kind of one of the first things that I said, that our last 7-day deadline doesn't necessarily have to be the deadline. Like, of course, we can't receive maps then, but we could still receive public input in terms of like public comment or listening from our
absolutely.
constituents about which maps. It's not, I want to make it clear that just because we can't receive any more maps at a certain point doesn't mean that we're not listening to our.
Absolutely not.
opinions
And
about things.
so when I spoke to Woman Riley, we made the motion and second at the meeting, saying that public input was literally because, again, December 21st, when we have to vote on it, that actually is a business meeting. So if anyone from the public wants to provide input post the deadline, they still have another opportunity to do so. Again, under the guise of what I said, maximizing that public input. So yes, they would. And we'd encourage it. So absolutely.
Right. So I guess I have one last question that just came to me is I wonder if it's allowable and possible to have some kind of straw poll among the public of the final maps, something like not an official vote, obviously, but something like, a place to receive feedback that's maybe not, write a whole comment to your representative or to the clerk or to the redistricting email address, but maybe just like a form or something online, just so we can see an unofficial straw poll of the public if there's any map that's particularly favorable.
So, Woman,
Okay.
and here's what I mean by that. So, districting. What's that? Oh, I'm sorry. So, thank you. So, Councilwoman, I understand where you're coming from here. When I say not a good idea, I don't mean that on a substantive level. I mean that on a procedural level, right? So at the expense of being blunt, we're not talking about passing an RL that deals with a local ordinance to decide how long dog leashes should be in the city of Binghamton, right? We're talking about something that occurs in every municipality in the entire United States, that's enshrined in New York state law, enshrined in the New York State Constitution, and is codified in the United States Constitution, right, in Article 1. So that being said, procedurally, to ensure that this body is doing what it's supposed to legally do, I would say following the standardized process would be the way to go. That being said, I think it's a great idea to elicit feedback from the public in any way. I know I have been, and I will continue to, but procedurally, this body should not do that in some formal way that is outside of the current process, which again, it's seated in MPA. The MPA makes a recommendation to the body, the committee of the whole, and then we vote on it. But again, the idea of getting any feedback, I think, is a great idea. If someone can put out a Zoom poll or Survey Monkey or something like that, I think that's a great idea and I'm all for it, but that can't be formally endorsed for the purposes of this process because that is not formalized or codified in the process.
Right. And to be clear, that second thing is more what I was suggesting, an informal.
Yeah,
struggle,
no,
like-
that's
like
fine.
not
Yeah.
on the city's website necessarily, but just something where I think it's easier. The easier it is to participate in something, the more likely people are to participate. And so
Absolutely.
sometimes it can be overwhelming or a deterrent if someone has to then compose a whole email
Totally.
to the represent instead of just, oh, let me click this link and click on the map that I
Absolutely.
prefer,
Sure.
So an unofficial
Councilman Burns, go ahead.
solicit.
I would just say solicit feedback.
Right. Okay, fair enough.
Thank you. Regarding the 28th. So tonight's meeting, I knew what was going to happen at tonight's meeting and I knew it last Friday.
Right.
Right. So could we say, I know we can't have the public will do what they want. We could suggest to them, but could we say that for our purposes, we present to the committee any maps a few days before before the 28th, so that all of us that are not on the committee and everybody can be able to take a look at these maps. Instead of the 28th, we get on the 28th, I'm not on the committee, but I'll get here and suddenly, everybody's going to decide on maps. Whereas if we get them in advance as possible, much in advance as possible, I might be able to call Tom and say, Tom, do you realize that this map is cutting out blah, blah, blah. We have a Democratic caucus, we have a Republican caucus. The Republicans are in the majority, of course, and we have a Republican mayor. So we all want to avoid any gerrymandering and we all want to avoid anything like that. So I'm wondering if we could just ask everybody to give those maps by that Friday, just even the mayor, ask everybody to get their RLs in time for Friday. And we get these maps in by Thursday or Friday so that we can all look at them over the weekend. And then on that Monday, only the three of you meet, but I mean, we could all have a better decision-making process.
So
Makes sense?
I appreciate that. Thank you, Councilman Burns. So here's what I will do. Number one, all of you know me. When I chair a committee, I always encourage and always have anyone on the body who's not a member of that committee to be there. So number two, as chair of MPA, I'm going to make an executive decision for full transparency. Lee, I will give you a call tomorrow. And as the arbiter of all emails that come in, for purposes of redistricting, I would like any map that is received by the public within 24 hours of being submitted to redistricting at cityofbinghamton.gov to be forwarded to the city council member list. So everyone gets it right away and there's no issue. I'll meet with you tomorrow and we'll work out the logistics for that. Business days, yes. 24 business hours.
I think that's a great idea. My only concern is you'll be, or somebody will be looking at those means and making sure, because there's no sense of wasted time, like you said before, or we said before about one that doesn't qualify.
Well, I agree with you, but again, right, for purposes of transparency, at the end of the day, if the map meets criteria or not, it's still a matter of public record.
Right.
Right. So if any of my colleagues want to analyze a map that clearly doesn't meet all of the criteria because all of the variances are above 10%, My personal suggestion would be, don't waste your time, but this is America. If you want to do it, go nuts. That's on you.
Right.
So going with the approach of, we get it at the end of the business day, the clerk's office checks it, whatever gets in the inbox, we just send it to everyone and everyone does what they choose. And that takes care of that issue, Councilman Burns.
Right.
But what about the maps that maybe you are going to present? Would we be able to look at that before the 28th?
I don't even know if I'm doing any maps, but I don't know if you're asking me as a generality or me specifically.
General.
I objectively, that is the purview of the person who creates the map. They could submit it to the email inbox. They could email it to everyone. They could drop bomb it on the last day. That is entirely their purview. Again, this is America. That's their choice.
I agree with that. The problem is we can have fun playing maps. We're not playing Risk. We want to, if you don't have the software or you're not loading it and you don't know, then we're just kind of playing games with if we don't know. How do we know if it's even worth? I get it. We can do whatever we want. It's America, all that stuff. But how do we know if it's a real map?
The book value tab. So again, as I stated earlier,
If it's a PDF, there's no way to know other than
if you export the .maps file, the book that shows the variances per district are in the file.
Okay.
Again, theoretically, if you don't know how to deal with the file stuff, you could hypothetically, with the tool, create a map, take a big screenshot of it, save it as a PDF, take the book value area, screenshot it, save it as a PDF, and then submit that. And you absolutely can do that. I would say, I would, as I said earlier, if MPA receives a map, is it a matter of public record? Absolutely, yes. Will it be dealt with any differently in terms of being public record? Absolutely not. However, that being said, for purposes of ensuring that the MPA is considering any draft that meets all New York State Home Rule guidelines, the committee cannot review a draft in which we cannot know with 100% certainty that all 7 districts population-wise fall within 5% variance of the mean, which is 6,893.
So in the end, who's doing that? Corporate counsel? Who's actually stamping the final, whatever we're doing that it approved, that meets that?
Who's stamping? What do you mean by that, Mr. President?
Who's going to make the final determination that what we vote on meets all those? The committee, the corporate counsel's office, who makes that final?
I'll definitely look into it, but I'm going to rely heavily on Councilman Scringy because he has the most expertise with running the program. I will sit with him and make him go through and show me how it does it. I need to be able to make sure that what I'm recommending or what we're drafting meets the requirements, but it's not the type of thing we want to have one person doing. I think we need to have multiple people doing it to make.
So I want to see maps. It'll be fun, but I really don't want to see ones that don't.
And I was
Well,
also going to
criteria.
just as practical. I understand what you mean, sending everything that comes in just for transparency. It may behoove you though, for people to say, this one doesn't meet the standard, this one does meet the standard as they come in, as they get pushed out, so that if people want to.
So I'm going to be very upfront with all of my colleagues here. Okay. I am not going to do that. And here is the reason why.
Okay.
Because the problem is, and I mean this objectively for every member of this body, the moment that an opinion is made about something, it negatively impacts the process. I will be very open and transparent here. I said this on the night of the MPA meeting, and I will say it again here on the public record. This is the second time. The city clerk and the deputy city clerk, the decision to not have them involved in this process anyway substantively is an executive decision that I made. And the reason why I made that decision is because Those two important job functions are appointments of this body. I want an objective, open, transparent process. I want no opportunity for the process to be questioned because someone gave an opinion about something and in the end, their opinion was wrong. I am just letting you know, I am not doing that. Plain and simple. If you want to do it, go right ahead. I will not. Councilman.
Yeah, so if the majority caucus has come up with a map. You caucus, and the four of you come up with a map.
Sure.
And you're not going to give it to us until the day that is going to meet. But what if we had I mean, wouldn't it be more transparent, just as the mayor wouldn't put an RL in here? I mean, in an emergency situation.
Yeah.
But, he's asked everybody to get the RLs in on time and everything. So there's transparency. Everybody has a chance to look at everything.
Sure.
So if we come up with a map, we share it with you. If you guys came up with a map, share it with us. And then we could, I know you talk about that at the committee.
Yeah.
Oh, there's only 3 people on the committee. So I just think it would be better. So, to put all the cards on the table before that 28th on the, the Friday or the Thursday before that. So we'd at least be able to see it and talk about it.
Councilman, I understand where you're coming from. So I can only speak for myself, right? So to meet the concern that you brought up earlier about non-committee members as well as committee members getting those maps, I made that executive decision because I think that's an excellent point you made. Okay. I can only speak for myself, so I will speak for myself now. Have I played with the tool? Yes, absolutely. I'm on YouTube playing it. I illustrated how to use it. I have not made one citywide map yet. Okay. I have not talked to any colleagues. I genuinely do not care what letter anyone at this table has after their last name. I don't care about party. I don't care about caucus. I don't care about majority. I don't care about minority. I care about one thing: numbers. Okay? Considering the fact that we unanimously agreed that public input maximized is the best thing, I will be up in front and honest with you about how I singularly would operate. If I singularly want to submit a draft, I would actually want to wait until the end. And here's the reason why. Because I want to be educated and informed by potential drafts that are coming in from the public over time. More specifically, from the roughly 7,000 people that are my boss, the residents of the first district, because that might educate me about something. That might make me think of something that I did not think of. So I will be very upfront and transparent with you. For that reason, I would wait until the end because I like to make decisions after I've heard everyone communicate. That's just me. Is that a right or wrong way to do it? No, they're just different. But again, as I said, this is America. I am not going to put my colleagues on it one way or another. If they want to submit it early, that's great. If they want to submit it at 4:59 p.m. on November 28th, just as any member of the public, it is their right, and I am not going to say one way or nothing about it. Period, and that's it.
Okay. Is there any, would there be any benefit in having one more before the 28th or no?
One more,
MPA meeting?
I'm open to that. That's fine. Sure.
Because if it seems like we need to, of course you have Thanksgiving. And I realize
Thanksgiving week,
next week.
scheduling wise, that was the problem that we ran into.
Right.
So,
Okay. Well, let's just continue communicating via email. You can work with the clerk's
Yeah,
office.
and
then-
if another date comes up, I have no problem holding another meeting. I think that's a fine idea,
Okay,
Mr. President.
go ahead.
Thank you again. And just for clarification, if the community and or council members decide to send something to the email box in order to have the best, I want to say, well, in order to have the most information and be as transparent as possible, the preferred process is to download and share as you described in the video, saving the file, downloading the file, and sending it so we can upload it into the GIS. However, if they are using tools that they prefer, like there's several other tools that were used throughout the state as well as the Broome redistricting process. If they send us the PDF where the borders are marked and the numbers are also attached as a PDF, we can review them. It will just take time for us to then upload it as the into the GIS, correct?
Respectfully, Councilwoman, I'm actually going to say no on that. And here's the reason why. In principle, are there other nonprofit based as well as private sector based software solutions that can be used for redistricting purposes that are not Broome County GIS portal? Absolutely, yes. And absolutely, any member of the public could use such tool and submit it. And I completely support that. Here is the issue from a procedural perspective that comes into play. Any tool that is not Broome County GIS portal, by definition, is receiving data that I do not know where it is sourced from. And so the problem becomes, if the data is not properly sourced, i.e. census.gov, that's a data problem. And if you have a data problem, we by definition have a map problem. So practically speaking, everything you said, absolutely yes. I would encourage any of my colleagues who receive a map like that to take your time and to go and plug that into the Broome County GIS. But for our purposes, to ensure that the data is mined from the proper federal census source, procedurally, we will only use maps for draft purposes that are generated by the Broome County GIS tool. Because again, that is the official tool.
Okay. Briefly, we got to roll here.
Yes,
Go ahead.
briefly, just as a follow-up to that, I wonder if we do receive any maps like that that are made by other software, maybe we could encourage whoever submitted them to take the time and plug it in, just so that we're not overwhelmed.
Yeah.
You know, if someone has the
absolutely.
time to make one map on the software of their choice, it might be easy for them to take that and plug it into the
Yeah,
official.
absolutely. I mean,
GIS.
I don't deny for 5 seconds coming off of what Councilwoman Riley's talking. I mean, there are very, 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 and I say this as an economist, there are very robust tools that are private sector based. But again, for our purposes, to ensure that we're following the proper process, we need to make sure that we are using the tool from the county government that is the only endorsed tool that is, this is properly where the data is being fed. But again, absolutely, if you want to use that, that's great.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, anything on the pending legislation briefly? Nothing. Okay.
Yes, we have 2 union contracts. We have 8 RLs going to Wednesday. And does anybody have any questions on any of those?
Anything else? Take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thanks, everyone.